Hi everyone, welcome back. I'm Frank Sullivan here at Digital Craftsman. And again, I'd like to welcome back Mikkel Drescher, our Senior Solutions Architect.
Hello again.
And we're going to be talking about something quite interesting today. As business has evolved, as technology has moved on to support new ways of working, so has the IT supply chain. How we buy and consume and produce IT services has changed fundamentally, and with that has led to a shift in the way in which we manage security for this IT supply chain. From the apps that we use, the software, the data stores, the connections between different endpoints, it's added a tremendous amount of complexity to the way in which we go about security. So I guess the starting point for securing your IT supply chain really begins with the concept of who am I?
Yes.
We're not going to go into identity politics, but we are going to dig into digital identity today.
Yes.
Who am I? Can I prove that I am who I am? And do I have a right to be there? Those are the three fundamental questions to ask. So, Mikkel, assuming that a business wants to get control of their IT supply chain, they want to begin the process of a security audit, how do they go about understanding digital identity and how it relates to all of the different actors across their supply chain?
On a slightly philosophical point, identity is not a token, but identity is who I am and how I behave. However, it still starts with me claiming who I am. And let me give you an example. When I make a payment with a bank or pay for something, I use my debit card or my credit card these days. I still can use cash, but that's getting more and more phased out. And again, looking at the past, it used to be simpler in the way that you had a relationship with one bank and that did everything for you. That changed. Back then you had one debit card. This is my debit card from one bank.
This is my card reader.
Yes.
On my phone even.
But you know the typical meme in the modern world and the modern financial world, if you had a wallet that didn't have 15 different card holders in it, you were nobody. And with that comes an interesting problem. You had 15 cards for 15 different financial institutions, and your card was your token of your identity. And you typically these days secure your identity towards anybody who, with whom you have a financial relationship. When you use your card as a payment, you use a PIN, personal identification number, which is typically 4 digits. The problem is when you have 15 or 20 cards you need to use, that's the thing. It is explosion. It's the explosion of complexity in your brain. How do you manage 20 different pins for 20 different cards? Because every bank mandates you have to have a unique pin for your card.
I think it's very difficult to remember 20 pins. Now, imagine that you have to secure that with 1,000 employees, 100,000 employees. Complexity has become unmanageable.
Let me stop you right there, because that's a very important thing. We need to start thinking about it. How do individual people, how do they deal with that complexity?
Well, we're the irreducibly simple unit of people interacting with systems or interacting with each other.
Yes, but still, if you have, think about yourself. You have 20 cards with 20 different pins. How do you reduce the complexity? There's a very simple, very humane solution to that. Radical simplification. And that is use the same pin for every card. And if you look at security audits, you will find that a lot of people use the same pin for all of their cards. And if you use that example and translate that into the digital world, people having more and more accounts, login, username and passwords everywhere, people radically simplify that complexity by using the same password or extremely simple passwords like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, or password, or I am me, or whatever, as a way to manage that complexity and not have to memorize not 20, but hundreds of usernames and passwords that they use in their digital world.
No, that's a very important point, but I want to break it down for our viewers. One of the principles of security is risk management and risk reduction.
Yes.
In order to reduce risk, you go by the old proverb, don't keep all your eggs in one basket, because if the basket drops, all the eggs break. Coming back to your debit card analogy, if you've got 20 bank accounts with 20 cards, you've got £100 in each account. If you had different pins, the maximum amount at risk is £100, because I can only access one. But if my PIN code, 1234, is the same across all 20 cards, then you stand to lose everything you've got. You stand to lose £2,000.
Exactly.
I think. Does my maths add up?
I didn't calculate, but yes. 20 accounts are 100 is 20,000.
Okay.
It's £2,000, yes.
So the same really applies to, let's say there's a data breach for my utility company, my electricity or gas provider. I use 1Password with them, but it turns out that that password might be the same for what I use at work.
That's basically how you describe identity theft. Because when you have a data breach on one service that's unrelated with another one, that's a typical collateral, and then there are huge databases of passwords on sale in the dark web in various different places where you shouldn't go, but nonetheless they are there.
Click the link below this video in order to access all of Mikkel's passwords.
Yes. No, I won't share my passwords with you. But the point here is that, that this collateral damage is used for identity theft. These password databases are used in regular attacks on websites to look at exactly this thing. When you know one identity of a person or one username and password combination on a website, you can engineer relatively easy when people use very simple passwords to go to other websites. This is, for example, how it's suspected the very big Apple iCloud leak that happened with celebrities, rather risque pictures being shared. That it wasn't that people broke into the accounts, but happened to have access to the same passwords in other services, and then tried them on Apple's iCloud. Bingo, they went in. Now there are different strategies how to mitigate that, and that very much depends on how companies take up the digital transformation in this area, how companies design and architect the IT landscape, and how they help their employees work with that. But there are even same strategy that can be used in the private life, with either what's called password managers to reduce complexity in your mind, not technical complexity, but complexity in your mind. But there's a different strategy that we can use in the business landscape to reduce the complexity and even increase security for systems.
Just to recap on some of the key points here, we've talked about the increasing complexity of the IT landscape. We do business, not everything internally, everything vertically integrated. We outsource a lot of things like IT support. We deal with SaaS companies. We'll deal with external providers on a day-to-day basis. And the base component for understanding security is understanding who are they and are they allowed access. We call this identity and access management, or IAM. We talked about one way to manage complexity in both personal and business life is using a password manager. That's something fundamentally important across the organization to reduce the risk of something going wrong. But I think there's something fundamentally more important here to understand, and that's the steps that we would need to go into, the steps that we would need to take to get unauthorized access into a system. There are multiple layers of access at times.
Yes, that goes back again to our beginning example. Wouldn't it be cool if you had 500 services you would access, and all with the same digital identity? And that is possible. This way of describing your one identity, which is distributed and shared across or accessed or consumed by hundreds of different services, is called single sign-on. It goes a bit further, meaning that when you once authenticated as being, yes, I am myself, I've done this through certain means, we get to that later, I don't need to do that again until my session, let's call it session, expires, and I have to do that again.
Yep.
But once I've done that, there's a secure way how this session is encapsulated in what's called a token, and that's shared between your identity provider and services that consume that identity to give you access to certain features. For example, accounting software
Yes.
that would be integrated with an identity provider.
Get into my email.
Exactly, your email. That is, in the personal world, you have Google, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. These services, or even Instagram or others, Snapchat, they open up their identity mechanisms as identity providers to log in into other services. You see it very often. Log in with your account with us, or log in with Facebook or Google.
Someone else has already done the authentication.
Yes, the authentication is done by Facebook or Google in that example. And those services don't do this account management anymore, this technical user account management. They only see, have this ID, this person has been identified by Google or Facebook, we accept that, and we only deal with what these people are allowed to do with our service. This is this SSO bit.
So we're going to have to wrap up shortly.
Yes.
But one of the final things I wanted to talk about was what happens when that session starts. I've noticed that we've started getting text messages every time I log into my email. What is that? And how do I get that?
That's a response by allowing many, many different services to access or use the same user account, user ID. This can be a risk. And you need to mitigate that by securing how you actually vet yourself in an identity. So it is not, in this situation, this scenario, it's not enough to say it's a username and a password. You need different means of attached identity information. Say, if you lose your username or your username and password combination, that's in the digital world very easy and people can very quickly use that. It's greatly increasing security or the vetting process of your digital identity when you use a different additional means of identifying yourself. And that is done through a different means of communication. The first one always is typing in a username and password. And then the system will ask you, okay, fine, but actually tell me whether you really are. And that is done through sending a text message or another way of sending that information to a different means of authentication. That's often or used to be a hardware token. And these days, you use your mobile phone typically by getting text messages.
So those randomly generated numbers.
Randomly generated numbers. It's a different communications channel that's different from entering your username and password to say, yes, I get that ID. It can be a text message, or it can be using a different little application that's on your phone. It's, for example, Microsoft uses this for securing their Office 365 logins. That use a little app, Google Authenticator, Microsoft Authenticator, even HMRC starts to use this when you access your personal tax account or your company's tax account as a secretary. You not only have to enter your gateway ID and password, but also use the HMRC application that supplies you with time-sensitive one-time passwords on top of that. And that adds the extra layer of security on the user identity to allow you to use this identity in more than one place. And that heightens the barriers of cracking or thieving the identity and relaxing the requirement that you have to have a different PIN for each debit card.
So when it comes to security from the perspective of identity and access management, those three things are pretty good in terms of a starting place for a business. We're talking about password managers, standardizing that. We're talking about multi-factor authentication, text messages, thumbprints, things like that. We haven't really covered biometrics here. And then the final one was single sign-on, understanding how to securely identify or securely authenticate people without having to go to the effort of remembering 500 different passwords.
Yes, there's one final message that's very important with that. and that is that from our point of view, multi-factor authentication, that's the technical term for using your phone for additional security. MFA and SSO is a pair that you cannot separate. You have to implement both at the same time because you heighten the layers and requirements of security on one level, MFA, to lower the complexity of using different logins with every different service. This is how you balance that out. If you don't implement MFA and SSO, then the last resort to reduce the risk for yourself is password managers.
Mm.
So our message is always use MFA and SSO, and if you can't, resort to password managers.
Mm. Finally, I'm going to end this video on an old proverb. Trust, but verify. I'm Frank Sullivan. This is Mikhail Drescher at Digital Craftsman. We're talking security in this video series. If you'd like to learn more about what we do and who we are, and maybe security is on your mind, then have a look in the link below to what we can offer you. And hit us up on Twitter if you have any questions. We're here. Well, we're here. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.